what's going on, guys? It's J-Mass, and I'm back again with another dope New England adventure. It only took 2.5 years, but I finally got a microphone, which means I can actually talk to you guys from really far away. That's right, I considered myself a serious YouTube channel, but it took me 2.5 years to actually get a microphone to talk to you guys from far away. But the question remains, can you actually hear and see me from over here? Can you guys hear me? Hello?
Don't worry, guys, I'm not going to be using the microphone all the time, really just in shots where I'm like in the background or far away. What can I say? It's fun to play around with. I wanted one for quite some time now. But anyways, we're going to get right into today's exploration because this is one I'm wicked excited for. This is a location I've had on my list for quite some time now. Always wanted to come over here, and we finally are. I'm excited to bring you guys with me, and I'm sure some of you guys are familiar with the spot as well and have been waiting for me to cover it. We're going to be exploring Shade Swamp Sanctuary, which is actually an abandoned zoo. So we're out here in the town of Farmington, Connecticut, which is located in central Connecticut, right outside of the city of Hartford. And here in Farmington, Connecticut, just off of US Route 6, sits the remnants of Shade Swamp Sanctuary, which at the time was known as the Little Zoo, built in 1934. And it's basically named after the namesake, Shade Swamp, this forested area right here where I'm currently filming. So as I mentioned, Shade Swamp Sanctuary, built in 1934, and it's not the kind of zoo that you're probably envisioning. You know, it didn't have wild animals like elephants, lions, tigers, you know, all that stuff. It was actually primarily a wildlife rehabilitation center with local critters like raccoons, possums, squirrels, chipmunks, rabbits, that kind of thing. In fact, they also had a raccoon breeding program here, but the primary purpose was wildlife rehabilitation, caring for injured local wildlife. Now, unfortunately, the zoo didn't last very long, only until the 1960s before it was promptly abandoned, and today, all that remains are remnants and ruins of the zoo. Now, I'll get more into the history as we go, but I just want to get right into it and explore the abandoned Shade Swamp Sanctuary, also known as the Little Zoo, here in Farmington, Connecticut. We're going to get right into it, but as always, guys, my name is J-Mass. If you love urban exploration, checking out abandoned sites, and traveling all around New England and beyond, I'm always doing that on the channel, so feel free to subscribe to the channel. Also, shout out to all my members. You guys are awesome. You can see all my members here. These guys are so dope. If you want to be so dope and support me in the channel, become a member like them. Or you can follow me on Instagram at JMassOfficial. That's at JMassOfficial. But we're going to get into it and explore Shade Swamp Sanctuary, this abandoned zoo here in the town of Farmington, Connecticut. Built in 1934, abandoned in the 1960s. A location I've honestly wanted to come to for quite some time now. Let's get started.
All right, guys, so we're going to get started and explore this abandoned Shade Swamp Sanctuary Zoo here in the town of Farmington, Connecticut. We're taking the Shade Swamp Nature Trail. This is the beginning of it right here. I believe this is the Blue Trail. But mostly what we're going to be seeing today are small little ruins and remnants, nothing major. But still some cool ruins left behind. This right here is one of them, an abandoned fence you can see. This is from the days of the zoo. And in there, we're gonna get a closer look in a second, but you can see another building right there. Now, most of what we're gonna be seeing today are former exhibits, you know, animal dens and stuff like that, which I'm really excited to check that out. The other thing I wanna mention is, and I kind of alluded to this at the beginning in the intro, but we are right next to US Route 6 here in Farmington. Actually, right over here beyond the woods is the highway, so I apologize for the very loud noise from cars. I'm sure it's gonna be pretty noisy with all the traffic. But anyways, let's peek in here and check out this abandoned structure. Now, I don't know exactly what this building specifically is. However, I do know for a fact we're in one of the exhibits. All right, let's peek over here. Sorry, I told you it's gonna be pretty noisy. So this is pretty interesting. This is clearly some sort of animal shelter right here. Not sure what kind of animal would have lived in here. But as I mentioned, it was mostly local critters, raccoons, squirrels, chipmunks, stuff like that. Even bears, I believe, maybe deer, but all local wildlife from the Connecticut area. But this is interesting. This is an abandoned animal shelter right here. And from the fencing you saw, which was right over here, we are in one of the former animal exhibits or little rehabilitation areas. So that's kind of cool to see that. Obviously, a lot of graffiti, though, I will say. There's going to be graffiti everywhere. This is a pretty popular spot, you know, not too obscure or anything. And I'm sure a lot of you guys watching this are probably pretty familiar with Shade Swamp Sanctuary. Now, the exhibits I'm really excited to check out are actually down there. You can kind of catch a glimpse of them, some metal cages. So I think we're gonna walk down there next. I will meet you guys over there. All right, now these are what I was most excited to see. These abandoned metal cages, which once held animals, different kinds of animals. You can kind of peer in here. Check that out, right through the metal grates. You can see at one point there were animals living in that little den right there. Today, completely abandoned. Although I do wonder, since this is here in the woods, you know, right in the middle of the woods, if animals ever come in here still. Wild animals, that is. That'd be interesting to know. Now, I think we can actually go in a lot of these. Yeah, look at this, completely open. We can head inside this little exhibit. This is cool. So we are inside a former abandoned animal exhibit right here. Again, it was mostly local wildlife, so not like this was holding crazy animals or anything. No hippos or rhinos in here, but I do wonder what was probably in here. I have a feeling it was maybe some small mammal like possums or raccoons, rabbits maybe, beavers. I don't know, curious. Pretty cool stuff. So there are honestly a lot of these metal cages here. You can see there's another one right there. That's the one we just explored over there. And then there are a ton right down this trail right here. We're actually still on the blue trail, as you can see. The blue trail of the Shade Swamp Nature Trail. And there's quite a bit of these cages, but that's not gonna stop me from going inside every single one. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna take a peek at each one because while I'm sure most of them are pretty similar, I am curious to see if there are any, you know, distinctive characteristics. So here's another one, although this one is a lot more destroyed and damaged than the other. Guys, I got to apologize too. Aside from the car traffic, there's airplane traffic. That's like the 4th airplane to fly over my head in the last 3 minutes. I'm not sure if we're near an airport right now or anything, so apologies for all the noise. Crazy over here. But yeah, here's another abandoned metal cage, once again held animals. But as we peek at each of these little dens, I'm going to give you guys a little more information about the history because it is pretty interesting. So as I mentioned, Shade Swamp Sanctuary was built in 1934, at that time known as Little Zoo. Now the primary purpose was a wildlife rehabilitation center. Again, caring for injured animals, local wildlife from the region, nothing super crazy. They also did have a raccoon breeding program at one point, you know, specifically meant to breed raccoon babies and stuff. Now, one interesting thing is, although the primary objective was to care for local wildlife, you know, as I mentioned many times, possums, squirrels, chipmunks, rabbits, raccoons, stuff like that, they also did accept exotic pets. So there were some locals from the area who donated their exotic pets that they didn't want to care for anymore. From my research, I found that some of these included monkeys, there was an alligator, and the strangest one was actually a giraffe. Apparently there's a giraffe here at one point. So there were some other, you know, more exotic animals here, but those were former pets or, you know, originally owned by people. Now, one thing I should probably mention, which I didn't see this mentioned anywhere online, but considering this was built in the 1930s and mostly used throughout the 1930s and 1940s, obviously the welfare for the animals, while, you know, was there, you can kind of tell from the size of these cages, it wasn't taken too much into accountability because these are admittedly very small and cramped cages for animals. I don't know how many animals were each one, but these are admittedly pretty small cages. So I can almost assume the animals weren't completely happy in here. Again, this was the 1930s, so it's kind of how it was at the time. But it was a wildlife rehabilitation center, so at the very least, they were trying to care for these animals. It wasn't like brutality or anything. I really love these things, though, like these little cobblestone dens. I mean, clearly this was for animals to live in or hibernate in. Super cool to see. But those are really fun. But I gotta say, most of these exhibits are like quite similar. They're all almost cookie cutter in a way. You know what I mean? Like this one is the same. This one over here is the same. It's interesting. There are a couple exhibits though that are different, which I think we're gonna take a look at in a second. But yeah, as I was saying, operated throughout much of the 30s, 40s, and 50s as a wildlife rehabilitation center. It wasn't until the 1960s when Shade Swamp Sanctuary officially closed down. It's primarily been abandoned since then. Now, from what I could understand, the main reason why this was abandoned was just because by the 1960s, US Route 6 had most of its traffic cut off from, you know, other interstate and highway operations, you know, being constructed in the area. You have to consider by the 1930s, US Route 6 was like the primary highway in the area, not so much anymore. So most of the traffic had been cut off by that point. Yeah, cool stuff. I mean, there's a lot of these cages, I gotta say. There's actually more than I expected. I thought there would only be a few, but these are cool. All right, now these cages I'm actually pretty interested in because these look way different from the ones we've been looking at. For reference, we're literally right across from these ones on the trail. These ones are over here on this side of the trail. But on the other side of the trail right here, you got these much bigger cages. Now these ones are a lot larger in size, which makes me wonder what was in here. I don't know why, but for some reason I think there might have been birds in here because it's large. Almost looks like this was for birds to fly around in and roost, and I don't know, could be wrong, but I have a feeling this might have been a sort of bird or avian sanctuary right here. These are kind of tough to walk inside though. Actually, let me go to this side, might be able to. And we can kind of peer in here. Oh geez. This wood though is like in horrible condition, look at that. I don't want to break it, so I'm not going to step on that anymore, but I just wanted to see if I could take a better peek in here. Wow, this is cool. Completely mangled though, I gotta say. Most of the exhibits, while not in bad condition, some of them are completely mangled. Like the wood is rotting away and broken. The metal is like completely collapsed and caved in. Crazy stuff. But again, I wish I knew what animals were in what exhibits. Maybe I'll do some further research when I get home and start editing this video, but based on what I could find, you know, I wasn't able to discern what animals were in what exhibits. This is interesting though. All right, we're gonna head back onto the trail and keep going. I'm also occasionally seeing little things like this where it's just piles of debris, you know, where a cage or exhibit once stood. I mean, this is just a massive pile of random materials and scrap metal and debris just sitting there. There's another one right over here. So not every exhibit is in tremendous shape. Some of them are definitely destroyed, which I'm curious how that happened. But yeah, we got some more right over here. Some more of these sort of dime a dozen exhibits. You guys will have to comment below and let me know what animals you think were in these exhibits. I am genuinely curious. Obviously, again, it was local critters, local animals. But I'm curious, like, specifically which animals were in specifically which cages. You know what I mean? Oh, that's pretty cool. Now, also, just in terms of hiking, I mean, this is a beautiful little forest. As I mentioned, the forest we're currently in is called Shade Swamp. So the Shade Swamp Sanctuary name comes from, you know, the forest we're in, Shade Swamp. That was the name of it. It was also known as Little Zoo because it was a little zoo, but Shade Swamp Sanctuary is the more common nomenclature. This is cool. Got some little foundation piece right here, a cellar hole. Let's see if we can get around these fallen trees right here and take a closer look at that. I think I saw another one near the beginning of the trail, another sort of cellar hole type thing. I am wondering though, like, was this actually an exhibit or was this maybe just some random building? Not sure. But yeah, you can see that right here. This was made of concrete. I mean, for reference, all those were made of metal. This one concrete. So part of me wonders if this was something else. I'm sure they had other buildings on the property. I don't know, not sure, but it's whatever it is, completely covered in branches and trees. Super cool though. Now, one thing I want to mention is the Civilian Conservation Corps, or the CCC, which was a Great Depression era workers program started by President Franklin D. Roosevelt, actually operated here, and they assisted with the construction of Shade Swamp Sanctuary by building a shelter in 1934. Now, sadly, the reason why I'm not filming the shelter while I'm talking about it is because it actually collapsed not too long ago. I think in 2021 or 2022. The 1934 CCC shelter, which was constructed in conjunction with Shade Swamp Sanctuary, sadly collapsed and no longer exists. So I really want to film that, but unfortunately it's not there. I might try to grab a sneak peek of it before I leave here today, but unfortunately that piece of history has been lost, which is kind of sad too, because it was actually placed on the National Register of Historic Places. So it was one of the most historic buildings here on the property. But But anyways, I'm just kind of walking around the Blue Trail right now. It is a really beautiful area, but I'm not finding any more ruins or remnants. But I'll meet back with you guys when I do. Unfortunately, I'm not finding many more major remnants or anything, although I am finding small stuff here and there. For example, right here, you can see what looks to be an abandoned fence snaking through the woods right here. There's some more portions of it over there. So there's definitely a lot of fencing. And since the fencing is right here and the main trail is right here, that leads me to believe that when the zoo was operational, this was probably the main walkway where visitors and staff walked. And then of course you had all of the exhibits along each side. So this was probably the main part of the zoo where all the exhibits were, the main path. I don't know, it's kind of cool though, but not finding too many ruins. I'm gonna search around a little bit more, tell you guys if I find anything else, but this might actually be it, if I'm being honest. Here's some more of the fencing right here. Oh, wait a minute, I think I see something. You guys see that over there? Let's see what that is. I'll bring you guys with me. All right, so we definitely got a decent sized structure right here. This is probably another abandoned animal den or exhibit, not entirely sure what, but yeah, look at this. This kind of reminds me of the very first one we saw, you know, the very first one of the video that had that sheet metal around it, because this is sort of the same. But yeah, another pretty decent sized building. Completely in ruins though, as you can see. The wood has almost entirely rotted away and decayed. That's interesting. There's some shingling on top. Huh. Let me get a closer look. Wow, that's cool. This one is interesting because it's like kind of far up. The exhibits are right down there, but you have to walk up this hill to find this abandoned building right here. That's interesting. This is a pretty cool place. Also very beautiful. Again, I've mentioned this, but just in terms of natural beauty, this place is quite serene. I have seen a couple other people walking here, but for the most part, I've had it to myself. It's been nice. All right, I think this right here might be an abandoned grill or a stove. Now, if you guys have gone to zoos and parks, I'm sure you've always seen picnic tables with grills beside them for, you know, visitors, just recreational use. If I had to guess, that's probably what that was. There was probably picnic tables here at one point for visitors to come and sit down, have a picnic, you know, grill some food. That's what I think this might be. Not 100% sure, but I mean, I don't know what else that could even be. So that might be an abandoned grill. Though I am surprised that there's no picnic tables or anything left behind. You'd think there would be. But that's kind of cool to see. Now I did notice a couple like random pieces of metal sticking out of the ground too. Yeah, right over here, look at this. Some random metal right there. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like as you walk around, you just see random stuff jutting out of the ground, stuff like that. Concrete, metal. Though I will be honest, I think that is mostly about it for Shade Swamp Sanctuary. The little zoo, built in 1934, abandoned in the 1960s. Pretty cool though. I've wanted to come here for quite a while. As a lifelong resident of Massachusetts, I know better than anyone else that the housing market here in New England is completely unaffordable and unsustainable. But not to fear, because Shade Swamp Sanctuary here in Farmington, Connecticut has you covered for your fix of affordable housing. Just like this beauty right behind me, you can live here for the low, low price of free. Just don't get caught. All right, guys, I'm going home. I'll catch you later. This is nice. Okay guys, so before we leave here for the day, I just want to give you one final walkthrough of all the abandoned exhibits, just because they are so cool to see. This was the very first one that we started at, and arguably from what I've seen today, the most intact of all of the abandoned animal dens. I mean, this one is actually not that destroyed. I mean, you can even go inside it like this. Check out that dragon. Oh, wagon. Is that what it says? I don't know. But yeah, there was this one, the very first one we started at. And then you head down this trail. And that leads you to all of the metal cages we saw. The metal cages are right down here, this little trail. And there's a lot of them. I wasn't able to count how many, but quite a bit. Look at that little hole in the ground. I don't think I showed that. That actually leads to one of the cages right there. But there are quite a bit of these metal cages. Yeah, look at all that. I'll have to go in and count how many there are. I think there's a lot of them, honestly, probably over a dozen. But as I said, I do wonder if any wild animals in the area ever use them. I mean, clearly they're abandoned, but I wonder if any wild animals ever come in here, like, you know, any deer, raccoons, or possums or anything, porcupines. I wonder if they ever come here and just, you know, hang out. And then of course you got these big ones right over here, which these I'm curious about because these are the biggest of all of the metal cages. My guess is birds, just because they're tall, you know, giving birds more freedom to fly, but not entirely sure. Although I did mention there was a giraffe here at one point, so maybe the baby giraffe was in there for a little bit. I don't even know at this point. But very cool stuff. I'm glad I got to bring you guys along with me here at Shade Swamp Sanctuary, and I think that really about does it. Hey, thank you guys for joining me. I've been J-Mass as always, and this has been another dope New England adventure. And today we explored Shade Swamp Sanctuary, also known as the Little Zoo, here in the town of Farmington, Connecticut. And it was really cool to see all the ruins and remnants of the zoo. I mean, kind of painted a picture of what that place looked like back in the day. I mean, we saw fencing, exhibits, dens, concrete foundations. I mean, there were so many ruins and remnants to explore. A lot more than I expected, and it was really interesting, especially in this environment that we're in, you know, right in the middle of Shade Swamp, this very heavily forested area. It was beautiful, and again, kind of like walking through history, seeing all those zoo exhibits. But as I mentioned, Shade Swamp Sanctuary was built in 1934 as a wildlife rehabilitation center, primarily helping injured local wildlife, caring for them and rehabilitating them. Of course, they did take exotic pets here and there. Monkeys, an alligator, and a giraffe were the main three I could find. Unfortunately, though, it didn't last very long, only until the 1960s when the zoo was promptly abandoned, primarily due to declining traffic from US Route 6, which is right next door. And speaking of that, I do have to apologize for this being a very loud video. This was one of the noisiest places I've ever filmed at, which is ironic because we're in the middle of the woods. There were constant airplanes flying over me. The cars were loud right next door. It was crazy loud in this area, like, again, for being in the woods. But it was still cool nonetheless, and I'm glad I got to bring you guys along with me. This had been on my exploration bucket list for quite a while, and I enjoyed it. But as always, guys, if you love urban exploration, checking out abandoned sites, traveling New England and beyond, I'm always doing that on the channel. So feel free to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of that. Shout out to all my lovely members. You can see them right here. These guys are awesome. If you want to support me in the channel directly, feel free to join them by joining as a member today, aka an explorer. Or you can follow me on Instagram at JMassOfficial. That's at JMassOfficial. But I've been JMass as always. This was Shade Swamp Sanctuary here in Farmington, Connecticut. So buggy over here. God damn, you see all these mosquitoes? And I'll catch you guys in the next one. See you later.